Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
Oh, you will? Wow. Okay.
Hey guys,
Hey. Sorry. I'll react to that. Sure. Hey guys, is me uploading another. Just it's another thing. Don't worry about it. You're not going crazy. Preemptive, like. So I watched why NATO's biggest weakness is Scotland. I watched that yesterday and posted it today, or I watched it today and posted it today. Anyways, the reason I had watched it sooner rather than later is because I saw this video's thumbnail and I'm like, okay, this video is making a video about that video, which makes me want to watch the video even more. And I did. And you guys said, which I expected, you know, there are a lot of discrepancies in that, or a lot of things that weren't exactly correct. And that Emperor Tiger Star made a video. And so now I'm watching that. Okay. So now everyone's good.
A few weeks ago,
The original link to this video, top of the description. Below that, link to the Discord. We'd love to have you. Let's go.
I saw this video from RealLifeLore that had a lot of problems in it, and it really bothered me. I wanted to make a video addressing some of the problems with it, but I was worried about coming off as someone trying to start drama, which is something I really don't want to do. But later I saw a video from Mr. Beat critiquing a Johnny Harris video, and it encouraged me to make this anyway because ultimately countering false information and encouraging further research is never a bad thing.
And you are never going to get copyrighted because if you are critiquing material of someone else, that is clearly viable under the copyright YouTube laws. I've read up a little. But yeah, if you're critiquing a video, I mean, that is 100% fair game. And I like with the, who's that guy who does a bunch of critique videos? Sunnyside, I think, isn't one. And then the one that called out Logan Paul. I feel like these type of the new kind of meta YouTube reaction channels or YouTube channels in general is reacting to other people's videos, but, you know, critiquing them. And that's pretty smart. And that's, you know, fair game. Oh, shoot. If you're afraid of calling out of starting drama over legitimate disagreement with a video, then that's their problem. So let's do it. What real life lore missed about Scotland and NATO? I just watched the real life lore video. I'd recommend you watch that. And let's see what Tiger Star has to say.
Trying to start silly drama. RealLifeLore has made plenty of wonderful videos that I've enjoyed. I am also clearly not perfect and have made mistakes in my videos numerous times.
I'm perfect.
What made me decide to counter this video was the fact that rather than it being just a typo here or a common misconception there, the entire premise of the video is simply a moot point based on pretty simple geopolitical research.
I'm going to try and sound smart. I'm going to sound so smart if I get this right. Wait. Or dumb if I get it wrong, but risk. Dude. What I was saying during the video that I didn't quite see how Scotland will be this is that Scotland, whether it is in the UK or not, and therefore in NATO or not, and if Scotland left the UK, they'd have to go through a NATO, if they did want to join NATO, which is their prerogative, all right? Then they'd have to go through a long period of trying to get in. They wouldn't be forwarded in as fast as, say, Finland or Sweden because of... If you want to get to the start of the video, just go watch their video, okay? Why am I getting angry? Just so many freaking comments that get on... I love you guys. Is that Scotland... in the UK or not, is still a very much NATO country, European Union country, Western country, aligned country. That made sense, I think. And so, just like Ireland, like if I was Ireland, I would never join NATO if I was Ireland because, or sorry, even better example than Ireland, because I suppose Russia could have some, like, poke you and, like, stir you up by going into your, maybe your water zones, and NATO is not going to attack, or the U.S. attack Russia with a non-NATO aligned country. Look at Ukraine, where we're not getting in direct conflict. But my reason was that Scotland is not. Look, go ahead if you want. Go this button, okay? The fast forward button, the right arrow button. Just click on it. Go to when I start the video. That's fine. But I want to get this out. Is that at the beginning, I'm like, okay, why NATO's biggest weakness is Scotland? And I'm like, okay, I kind of took that to mean, and throughout the video, it took that to mean, out of all the NATO countries, Scotland leaving would be the biggest blow to NATO. And so there, I'm right away like, what are you talking about? First, the USA. Second, Norway, which is close to what's this area called, where it's the closest place to strike the U.S. And Canada, if you wanted to set off nuclear weapons, this area over here. So Norway, I would say, is more strategically important than Scotland. England itself, just because of the firepower, France, Germany, Poland, are all more important than Scotland, right? But then I stopped myself, and I'm like, well, he's not saying that Scotland would be the worst country to lose in NATO. He's not saying that. So I had to take that back. He's saying NATO's biggest weakness is Scotland. Not that Scotland would be the biggest blow to NATO if they left over any other country, but that the possibility of them leaving NATO is so much higher than every other country that is of note, because of the referendums and many wanting to leave the UK. So that's fine. But again, biggest weakness, I don't agree with the original video, because Scotland is a Western aligned country. In NATO or not in NATO, it's not going to side with Russia, okay? So let's continue. Anyone who skipped forward, I'm stopping talking. Let's do it. Stop pausing or fast forwarding. Let's go.
But a lot of people who watch this video, and many of RealLifeLore's other similar videos, include hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who don't actively pay attention to geopolitics and rely on his videos for information. In the video titled Why NATO's Biggest Weakness is Scotland, after an introduction explaining various problems facing the United Kingdom, it talks about the possibility of Scottish independence, and how if Scotland gained independence, NATO's entire strategy for countering Russia would fall apart.
A threat that can not only end up dissolving the entire country after more than 3 centuries of unity, but could also undermine NATO's entire strategy against the Russians in the event of a war.
Yeah, the whole operation apparently falls apart if Scotland leaves. RealLifeLore then...
I don't think you're being very honest, Tiger, or what's his name? I'm subscribed, Tiger Star. I don't think he's being very... I think he's kind of putting more words into RealLifeLore's mouth than...
Undermine NATO's the entire country after more...
Guys, there's going to be a lot of this. If you don't like pausing, just put your dislike... Don't put your dislike. But it's going to be a long video. I'm going to pause a lot. Just giving you a heads up.
More than 3 centuries of unity, but could also undermine NATO's entire strategy against the Russians.
He says could undermine NATO's entire strategy against the Russians. I think that Tiger Star is pushing that over and furthering RealLifeLore's position outside of what he really said. But I also think that RealLifeLore over-exaggerated himself. So I think RealLifeLore over-exaggerated the importance of Scotland, and I think so far Tiger Star is exaggerating RealLifeLore's claim.
In the days of unity, but could also undermine NATO's entire strategy against the Russians in the event of a war.
Yeah, the whole operation apparently falls apart if Scotland leaves.
He never said that.
RealLifeLore then does a decent job explaining why Scotland wants to gain independence, how it almost got it in 2014, and how it's currently trying it again, but their efforts are being blocked by the British government. I would say his summary of that was perfectly on the mark. However, he says their efforts are being blocked primarily because not only would it cause chaos for the United Kingdom, but the entirety of NATO. Why? Well, apparently the main NATO plan for defense against Russian submarines is something called the GIUK Gap, a zone between Iceland and Scotland where NATO vessels prevent Russian submarines from getting wider access to the open Atlantic, which would cause trouble should war break out. The video also briefly mentions the possibility of Northern Ireland possibly returning to Ireland, and so if both parts leave the UK, then whoa Nelly, we're really in trouble. Ignoring the fact that Northern Ireland, while yes, it's growing further apart from the UK slowly, isn't likely to join Ireland overnight, there's a big hole in this idea. Scotland doesn't want to leave NATO. Every major party in Scotland supports staying in NATO. While it is true that the party that supports independent Scotland, the SNP, historically wanted to stay out of NATO, they switched their stance all the way back in 2012 as party policy. You can find plenty of interviews from party leader Nicola Sturgeon affirming this. And since Russia's little adventure in Ukraine, they're certainly not changing their minds anytime soon. To be a little fair, there is a bit of the video discussing Sturgeon affirming this party policy. You can find plenty of interviews from party leader Nicola Sturgeon affirming this. And since Russia's little adventure in Ukraine, they're certainly not changing their minds anytime soon. To be a little fair, there is a bit of the video discussing that if Scotland did want to stay in NATO, they'd still have to reapply, which could result in bureaucracy keeping them out for an unknown period of time, which is true. But most of the video operates under this idea that that's the most unlikely option, and that Scotland is more likely to somehow not rejoin NATO at all, which is simply not true. The video wasn't what if Scotland leaves NATO or why Scotland is important for NATO. It seemed to have this vibe of, hey guys, Scotland keeps trying to leave NATO and it's going to ruin everything.
I disagree. Again, I'm gonna state again, I think that real life lore might have been slightly misleading, but I think I keep forgetting Tiger Star is being disingenuous or being
if Scotland leave NATO at all, which is simply, and that Scotland is more likely to somehow not rejoin NATO at all, which is simply not true. The video wasn't what if Scotland leaves NATO or why Scotland is important for NATO. It seemed to have this vibe of, hey guys, Scotland keeps trying to leave NATO and it's going to ruin everything. It kind of creates a...
I think that's unfair. Okay. YouTubers make, you want to make a certain title that makes people want to look at it, but after watching the video, I didn't get this doomsday feeling from real life lore's analysis. So I think he was pointing out, hey, Scotland wanting sometimes, could leave the UK. They have major that would there's a big submarine, like the biggest submarine base to the United Kingdom is located in Scotland. That would have to be moved to England or some other United Kingdom country, territory. But I never got the sense that this was like a doomsday scenario warning from real life lore.
A false impression for the viewer. But okay, let's put that aside. Let's play devil's advocate and say that the video is a what-if scenario. Does the rest of the video hold up? No. There are many glaring, obvious holes that real-life lore doesn't even talk about during the video. Like mentioned before, the idea is Scotland leaving would cause the GIUK gap to be open to Russian submarines because now Scottish waters would be free of NATO vessels, giving the Russians an opening. Here are a few holes to this. 1. The Faroe Islands. So you may notice that this line representing the GIUK gap goes over these islands right here. These are not Scottish-owned islands. These are the Faroe Islands, a part of the Danish realm. Like Greenland,
Danish.
They do have a level of self-rule, but effectively are defended and under the foreign policy decisions of Denmark, another member of NATO. NATO can operate their ships from here. While Scotland's water boundaries do appear to cover a lot of area, the Faroe Islands aren't exactly nothing for maintaining a gap in this area. Even if it wouldn't solve everything, I was just kind of surprised the video didn't even mention the islands at all a single time. 2.
I was confused about that as well. Why they didn't mention the Faroe Islands.
Norway. Just like the Faroe Islands, Norway is also a part of NATO, and there are bases
Svalbard.
there right now that NATO uses. You can have a new gap from Iceland to Norway to cover, which wouldn't be that much larger than the GIUK gap as it is. There's even a part later on in the video where RealLifeLore talks about the dangers of Russian saboteurs to underwater cables, and he shows a line that goes from Iceland to Norway that's above the gap. Well, that's even more of a reason to try a gap defense there instead. Now, the counter is, well, what about nuclear submarines? It's one thing for conventional naval forces, but what about nuclear subs? They can't just be based anywhere. Well, as it so happens, the US has been having their nuclear submarines not only patrol, but dock along Norway for the past couple of years now. And there have already been plans set in motion for an outright US naval base in northern Norway that could host them in the immediate future, specifically for the purpose of combating Russian submarine activity. So we've already been moving past the
I have a question, guys. You know how the Chinese have been building up islands on atolls in the South China Sea to like go around a loophole around international waters? You know, that they have to be so far away from your coast, or so close to your coast and not further to be considered your territorial waters. But is China really smart in this? In that, did China find a loophole in that, hey, it doesn't say that land that rises above sea level to create an island from bringing in ships of sand and rock and dirt or whatever they're using to build up the islands in the South China Sea. Is there any rule that said, like, you can't do that? Because if there isn't, then that is genius by China by saying, okay, we want this area of sea, but the current international laws about your territorial sea boundaries are a certain way. But what if we build islands that we then claim, and then now we have increased territorial waters? So is that true? And if so, then couldn't other countries like NATO countries abuse the same loophole in if like you built up a platform in the gap to call your own and then get additional naval waters that you can patrol?
GIUK gap of submarine activity. So we've already been moving past the GIUK gap
Please
as a defense
answer.
line for the past few years. We're already moving away from it.
I know that's not completely connected, but please, I'm going to be looking for an answer to that question. If anyone answers that question, I will be very thankful, and I will see
GIUK
it.
gap as a submarine activity. So we've already been moving past the GIUK gap as a defense line for the past few years. We're already moving away from it, which leads to number 3. The GIUK gap wall is sort of outdated regardless. Obviously, the GIUK gap is an important transit route. There are reasons for NATO to defend it. But the idea that you need this wall here, it's a necessary rock-solid defense to prevent Russian submarines from getting through, is an outdated idea. To put it simply, the GIUK gap defense is a Cold War-era plan that does not hold the same weight as it used to. The whole point of the gap being defended, like some sort of wall to block Russian ships, was to prevent important locations further west from being within range of Russian missiles. But by modern standards, Russia doesn't need to violate the gap to be within range of most targets anymore.
Sure.
While this space would need to be defended should war break out, Scotland leaving NATO wouldn't really change the situation as it is now, because Russians are violating the gap all the time.
If you're Russia, would you almost like want global warming to happen? I mean, this is not to say, like, obviously, if you care about the suffering of other people, I don't think Russia really cares. Is Russia the one country, maybe Canada, but where their population isn't as vulnerable, maybe St. Petersburg, to sea level rises, but their land area getting out of the permafrost zone and into arable land and more livable temperatures would Russia benefit in a vacuum from global warming? Serious question.
Change the situation as it is now, because Russians are violating the gap all the time. Even geopolitical publications arguing the gap's significance acknowledge that this idea of some sort of like indefensible wall there needs to be changed anyway. It needs to evolve. 4.
That's the biggest number 3 was the biggest thing that makes me agree with Tiger here, is that I think, yeah, you're right here.
Scotland can just make a deal with NATO to let them use their bases.
Exactly. Why wouldn't they? Why are people act? I agree completely here. Why would Scotland, if they left NATO, automatically become like a Russian ally? It just doesn't.
Now, there is an issue over the Trident nuclear deterrent system based in Scotland, and it is true that an independent Scotland would want them out. But for other military necessities NATO might need in Scotland, if it really takes years for Scotland to reapply to NATO, they can just lease their bases in the meantime. Not only would that economically benefit them as a new nation, but it's something NATO does all the time. We have major non-NATO allies where NATO members locate military bases in non-NATO territory that they can operate out of. It's how NATO was able to participate in Afghanistan. Scotland wouldn't immediately have a ready defense system upon leaving anyway, so there's simply no reason Scotland wouldn't allow conventional NATO access to military bases there if it was really that necessary. The video sort of acknowledges this as a possibility, but says it's near impossible because it's assuming that the Trident system is the only thing that NATO could use there. As for the Trident system itself, while Scotland wants it gone, I don't see why it would be impossible for some sort of deal where it stays for a few years until the UK would have another base built somewhere else anyway. I think especially after Brexit.
I agree completely with Tiger here. RealLifeLore did seem to be communicating or talking in a way that was like
Everyone
that was so one-dimensional. It's like Scotland, if they leave UK, oh, that means they're out of NATO. If they're out of NATO, then therefore all NATO alliances are cut off. Therefore, Russia will use this gap and Scotland will do nothing about it. Therefore, danger. Completely agree there.
Understands that things don't just separate overnight anyway. There would be a transition period upon Scotland leaving that would set things up over a period of time, probably longer than the period of time it would take for Scotland to reapply and join NATO anyway and make it a moot point. Also, on another note, the bases at Fastlane and Coalport are not in remotely sparsely populated areas like you said.
The area around Fastlane is remote and sparsely populated, far removed from any prying eyes.
They're next to the most populated area of Scotland, including less than 30 kilometers away from the large city of Glasgow. Basically, to conclude things, this whole video is an alarmist take over something that is not only assuming a very unlikely scenario of Scotland wanting to stay out of NATO upon independence, but also an issue that already has multiple obvious solutions. NATO has already been moving ahead of this problem anyway. To paraphrase a comment left by a viewer on the video, it's like you're assuming Scotland leaving would create some Korea scenario between them with the rest of the UK when it really wouldn't be. Considering NATO was already moving past this problem as of a few years ago, it felt very unnecessary to make a 24-minute video on such a thing. While I did want to focus on correcting this video, I do want to add a little bit at the end of this for real life lore. You make great graphics and present a lot of information that not only can educate people about geopolitics, but do it in a very effective way. It's very important and I respect that. A lot of people take your content seriously, and a video this sloppy will either misinform a lot of people or damage your own reputation.
Okay. So one, I agree with the kind of clickbaity, kind of news style of like, fear sells, you know what I mean? Or that, I guess sex sells is the thing, but like when something is fearful, people click on it. People want to watch for a second. And I think real life lore is falling into that same thing. I think as channels get bigger, this is no excuse. You know, they want to make a video that's going to create money. NATO is a big topic. War in Ukraine, Sweden and Finland joining NATO, Scotland being a country that has sea territory, ocean territory that is crucial that is important in protecting this gap and keeping an eye on submarines, Russian submarines. But I agree with that, and I do think a few mistakes and such a linear or such a basic look of like one block means next means this without thinking about what each step entails. And so I agree with Tiger on that. Where I disagree is that I think, and this is only from me walking away from the video the other day, is I don't look, maybe some people do, but I don't look to any one source like RealLifeLore to be like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen. Let me copy paste this information into my brain. This is what I think about the conflict, right? So on the one hand, yeah, it's a clickbaity kind of fear-mongering type of title that's going to get a lot of clicks and make some money. But on the other hand, I think the video itself, I think a lot of YouTubers do that. The video itself, I don't think was as negligent in some areas as Tiger's putting it out to be. But especially with the the last few points he made, I completely agree with him. So yeah, when I was thinking, you're combining two big topics and, whatnot. But if we're going to start calling out RealLifeLore for creating clickbaity, fear-mongering titles to get views, then we have to call out a whole lot of other people. And it is completely legitimate. You should be able to critique other people's videos, and they should not get mad, right? They can tell you you're wrong or whatever, but RealLifeLore is awesome. They're a giant channel, great graphics, a lot of learning material, and they should be up for criticism for that. But yeah, I agree and disagree in different areas. Yeah, that's my take. Hope you guys are all doing well. This is my last video of the day. It is, it's only 6 p.m. My God. Days are getting longer though, right? Love y'all. Hope you're all doing well. If not, don't worry. Nobody cares anyway, so see ya. Oh, that's not funny, is it? I love you. I hope you're doing well. If not, you'll be good soon. Don't worry. Emotions are fickle. See you guys. Bye.